Hello, everyone, and welcome to the pilot episode of The Life of a Book, brought to you by the Association of Manitoba Book Publishers. The goal of this project is to reveal the stories and the artistry behind the making of books here in Manitoba. My name is Mel Marginet, and my pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm the newly elected president of the board of the AMBP, and I'm also the publisher at Great Plains Publications. We are broadcasting to you from Treaty 1 land on Turtle Island, now known as Winnipeg, Manitoba. We are in the homeland of the Métis Nation, and our water is sourced from the Shoal Lake 40 First Nation. On today's episode, we are going to learn more about This Place, 150 Years Retold, published by Highwater Press. Explore the past 150 years through the eyes of Indigenous creators in this groundbreaking graphic novel and anthology. Beautifully illustrated, these stories are an emotional and an enlightening journey through the Indigenous wonderworks, psychic battles, and time travel. See how Indigenous peoples have survived a post-apocalyptic world since contact. I love this book. I fell in love with it as soon as it came out. I really recommend that all Canadians read it. And I really wish that I had had this book to read when I was in high school. It's really great. It's sort of like a history book, only it gives you history told through the eyes and the experiences of Indigenous people in Canada. It's really great. Every chapter begins with a timeline. I really like the artistic choice to not have it go straight, but it kind of weaves through, gives the reader a little bit of context of the time that will be explored in the story, and then it launches into the story to kind of give a more direct and a more personal telling of that story. So, highly recommend. So we're joined today with the writer and illustrator behind Miigwech de Meg, We Remember It. Please welcome Brandon Mitchell, writer, Tara Audibert, illustrator, and Laura McKay from Highwater Press. Thank you all so much for joining us. And just before we begin, let's just go around the circle and everybody can introduce themselves, tell us a little bit more about you and your creative process. I'll start with you, Brandon.
Okay, hi. My name is Brandon Mitchell. I'm Mi'kmaq. I'm from Listigouche First Nations. That's in Quebec. I'm currently residing in Ferriton, which is unceded Westakway Peace and Friendship Treaty territory.
Hello. And Tara.
My name is Tara Audibert, and I'm an artist. I've been doing animation, comics, and illustration for about 20 years. And I live in Sunny Corner, New Brunswick. And Brendan and I actually went to school together, and that's how we know each other.
No way! Like since elementary?
No.
Or university?
we both went to college together in Miramichi.
Oh, that's so cool. Small world. Oh, Canada. Yeah. And Laura, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I am the managing editor at Portage and Main Press, Highwater Press. And in the context of This Place, I was the project editor and coordinator. And I live outside of Winnipeg here.
Hello, welcome. So I guess to get us started, we'll start with you, Laura. Can you just tell us just a little bit more about this project, kind of high level, and how did this project come to be?
Yeah, so the project really began with the new chapter grant that Canada Council had announced, which was funding specifically for special projects to just mark Canada 150. And sort of, we thought about it, didn't do a heck of a lot for a while. And Catherine, our publisher, started talking to David Robertson and Catherine Vermette about the grant and how we should do something, but didn't really know what it was. And just kind of out of that conversation and a project that Nigon had been talking about for several years, this idea of responding to Canada 150 as opposed to celebrating it, and also retelling history kind of came together in a really useful idea. So that conversation actually happened on a Wednesday. and the grant was due Monday. So we wrote that application in about 2 days, finishing touches over the weekend kind of thing. It was a wild ride. Grant applications at the last minute, as you know. And the original working title, I think, is useful, which was 150 Years and Beyond, an Indigenous History of Canada from 1867. So we really wanted to retell the last 150 years, but we also wanted to kind of gesture beyond this idea of Canada and beyond that 150. And it was chosen for the New Chapter grant, which was, there were only 200 projects chosen out of 2,000 applications. And it took over 2 years from that initial grant application to the actual completion of the book. So this is old news for me. We've been working on it a long time, but
it's in your bones.
Feels like it, yes.
Excellent. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Brandon. Can you tell us, how much did you know about the Salmon Wars of the 1970s? And then how did you take that research and how did you turn it into this story?
Okay, buckle up. I've got notes. No, it was, to start it all off, I guess I didn't really know a lot. And what I did know growing up, it was just whispers. Just like passing conversation, or, no one really went into a lot of detail in what happened. And keep in mind too, like I was only 1 year old when the raid happened, the raid in 81. So I don't remember anything at all. And then on top of that too, because tensions were high during that time, or even like the year before that, my parents decided to move us to Boston. And it was so funny to kind of hear these stories. As I grew up, as I got older, a lot of people would, and especially when I moved back to Ottawa, it was funny because back like when I lived there, everyone's always asking me like, "Oh, where are you from?" So I'm from Listigouche. Oh, and then they recognized, they would remember Listigouche, and they would remember the raids. And I was like, wow, like and these people were always talking about, like, well, I helped out, like I was there during the raids, and I would just sit there and be fascinated, like, really, wow. So I would get these stories or snippets from people who are back then, well, they're probably in their 60s now, but they were there helping out in solidarity with us back in the day. So that was always interesting for me to hear those stories, because they would always mention how much that event united not just our community but other Indigenous communities across Canada. So everything that I learned, or everything that I knew, was kind of like surface level, or oral history, right? Like that's the foundation of oral history, is people telling me their story and their experiences. And when I was approached for this project, which I'm so thankful for, I knew that I wanted to do something about treaties. I wanted to talk about treaties, and there were some ideas that were kind of floating around that I proposed. But one that was near and dear to me was talking about the raids that happened. And then when I got the okay to focus more on that, and then implement, talk about treaty education also, or talk about treaties, or our peace and friendship treaties, I was like, okay, firing on all cylinders, gonna get ready to go. And I was at first stuck, like, also coming from a quasi-academic background. I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna find the papers that were written on this, or I'm gonna do the research, and nothing. Like, a lot of this stuff, the foundation of what I was, not so much sharing or screen sharing, but the incident in Restigouche was really the only foundation that I had in terms of like academic research, to kind of like figure out like what I want to, or how I was going to tackle this story. And the incident in Restigouche is such an important piece of work and for Indigenous creators, right? Ellen Bumsways just did a fantastic job capturing what happened during that time. But what happened too was I was like, okay, well, I don't want to redo that. That was the hard part of finding the new narrative, right?
Right.
And so once again, a lot of the stuff that I do, it's like a jigsaw puzzle. Pieces were all over the place. And so what I was trying to figure out was like, well, how am I going to do this? How am I going to write a story without doing what has already been done? And I remember I was back home and I was with we were having lunch with my mother-in-law, and she just out of the blue, it's like, what's happening with you, and yada yada yada. And so I was like, well, I'm actually working on this story, and I was thinking about actually picking your brain a little bit, because she used to work at the band office during that time. And I said, well, I'm writing about the raids, but I want to write it from the perspective from Listigouche. And she was like, oh, you got to write about the first raids. I was like, yes, that's the whole idea. Yeah, June 11th, that's what I'm going to write about. And then she starts talking about what happened. And she gives me all these, she tells me the story. And I was like, I did my first notes or outline, and I gave it to her. And she was like, nope, like, wrong. I was like, what are you talking about? This is exactly what you said. And she goes, you have to talk about the first raids. And I was like, that's what I just did. And she's like, no, you have to talk about the ones that happened before that. And that's when I was just like, light bulb. I was like, what are you talking about? And then that's when she was talking about how the SQ used to come in, like almost every June, they would come in and intimidate and harass our fishermen, cut up the nets, confiscate material. And this was happening before 81. And then, so I had to change my, not so much change my questioning, but I was just like, okay, now I know what you're talking about. So I kept on digging deeper. And then that's when she told, that's when I kind of knew what I wanted to write about. So when she was talking about the first raid, she was talking about what happened before 81. And that led me down a deeper rabbit hole of, and when you're talking about that timeline, right? Like, okay, well, what happened before all that? And, but even then, a lot of the stuff was just snippets. It's hard to find concrete information on what happened before all this or before 81. And even in the documentary, it's just a one passing sentence that they came here before, but no one elaborated on that. So that's what I want to try and do, was elaborate on what happened before the June 11th raids. Stop me if I'm going in circles now. So, yeah. Like I said, buckle up. And then so that led me, like I said, it was like when I started going into research mode, that's when I was like trying to find keywords. And then I had to change the way I was researching again. A lot of the stuff that is out there is in French, or like, a lot of French documents. So I had to go in and pratiquer mon français, and reading again in French and trying to find those keywords, trying to find the key information that I was missing. But all that research did was just make my 30-piece puzzle turn into a 1,000-piece puzzle, and then it was trying to put those pieces together into a narrative thread. But yeah, like I said, it really, the catalyst was when my mother-in-law, when she said basically that I did it wrong. Do it again. But then it sparked
where'd you get the idea for the boy? Is that a real
well, that's
not a real character?
I guess that's it. So Darren's a fictional character. I think that was the other. That's what made all the pieces connect, because there was all these little things that had happened, and like, well, I don't want it to be just like a bulletin board, like when this happened and this happened. Mm-hmm. So I wanted the experience to be what happens when this kid sees all these things happening during the span of 3 days. because he was there. He was the one that was there, or he sees what happened the year before. So that the first 3 pages or 4 pages are about what happened before the June 11th raid, and then we skip a year to June 9th of 81 when we get that first letter saying "stop or else." Right. So that was his journey, seeing all these things happening. So it made it really easy once I figured out that it wasn't going to be a bunch of characters, but one character witnessing everything. Because a lot of the stuff that happened too, I realized, like, a lot of the information I gathered was through interviews also, like talking to people from the community, and telling them and asking them, like, well, what did it feel like, or what did you see? And and I tried to incorporate that as much as I could into the script
and into his experience.
Yeah, into his experience. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I love that. I love that character. I love the mom character. So patient, like, oh, just come, just see,
Oh yeah, it was.
And you just get the sense that she knows that, like, this is gonna open your eyes, but she just gives him the space and gives him the time to discover it for himself, really.
Yeah. Like it was one. Like I said, it once I had those main characters, everything just kind of like the rest was easy to write.
Amazing. Awesome. Thank you so much, Brandon. So I'm going to turn it over to Tara. So were you familiar with the raids before you started working on this project? And what aspect most influenced how you chose to illustrate the story?
I was not familiar with the raids at all. Brandon sent me the script and was kind of like, oh, would you be interested in maybe working on this? And when I read it, we had worked together before, and I thought it was just, honestly, at first, a story that he had made up. And I was like, whoa, this is crazy.
Really?
And
yeah.
Like, it made me cry. Like, it was just very, very scary to envision this happening to a child, I guess. And like, because it was this little boy, because he was like First Nations, I also just associated with my little brother. So it just made me feel even more like empathetic towards what he must have felt and how scary he must have been. So I was like crying, and I'm like, sure is, like, Brandon, like, you're like, this is crazy. And then I was like, I don't know if I asked him, or I think I asked him. He's like, no, this is real. Like, this really happened. Like, my story is made up, but this really happened. And I was like, what are you talking about? And then I had to like go and do a bunch of research. I watched film this investigation. Yeah, I was like, what's going on? Like, and the fact that this just happened in the 80s, like, in my lifetime, I thought that was just insane. And how much of this history is hidden. A book that we had also worked on together was about the residential schools. And like, I didn't know about that either until we worked on this book. And why am I not learning that in school? Why did I not learn any of this that is literally, down the street from where I live now? I mean, at the time I was a little older. I lived near Miramichi now, somewhat close, but at the time I didn't. But I never heard anything about it ever. And the fact that it was just in the 80s to me, or that all of these things were in my lifetime, was shocking, very shocking to me, I guess.
Yeah, it's what I love about the book too. Like, obviously it hits those high points that, we all know through history, but I just love so many of the stories just took like a little nugget or a fragment and then just shone this spotlight on it. And yeah, you think that, oh, I know about this history now. And it's like, what? Yeah, like I said, like, I wish I had it in high school. It would have just been amazing.
And I guess one of the things that Brandon and I that we talked about, because it is such a intense story, but we wanted it to be something that kids want to read. And I believe at the time what we talked about was also just adding in, like, even for us, like, both of our families, the things that we've worked on, we always talk about this, that even in the harshest of times, there's always humor.
Yes.
When people are dead, there's like, people are laughing, and it's like, what is going on? no matter what, like you could be poor and starving, but everybody is still laughing about something, like they're trying to make each other laugh. And that's kind of like a part of our culture, a big part of our culture, I would say. And it's something that Brandon and I discovered that we both share in our families. So something we wanted to put in, and just little things like that he's pointing, you know, with his lip. Like our families point and you give directions. You wouldn't point with your finger, you point with your lip. To the point where my grandmother like was driving in the car and she's giving directions, pointing with her lips, like go that way, dude's like, I can't look at you and give directions. So definitely like, you know, talk about trying to put in this addition of humor into it, and like from a kid's point of view, this is a serious thing, and they are going to be scared, but there is a humor to it because that's what your family is like. And that's what both of our families are like. I think, I don't know if I'm not speaking too much for you, Brandon, but like, sure. And I think that's something that we wanted to add into the story too, that it's not to make it lighter, just to make it something that's not just like, oh, this is the history. Like it's something that's going to be enjoyable to read, I guess, which I think fits.
Question for Laura. How much influence did High Water Press have in deciding which stories were told? And then what guidelines did you give to the artists? Because it, you know, the stories very much all kind of fit together, and yeah, and they flow through time really well. So yeah, I'm just curious about like the structure and how you made that happen. Looking at it as a publisher, it kind of blows my mind organizationally.
Yeah. Yeah, so part of it came out of, as I say, we imagined it in that grant application. And when we pitched the idea to the authors that we knew we wanted to participate, many of them already kind of had an idea of what they wanted to talk about. So for example, Katharina Vermette really wanted to do something Métis. Jen Storm was really keen to do something about Jack Fiddler. David Robertson wanted to do a World War I story. And so out of that, we sort of decided to break that 150 years into roughly 15-year chunks, because there were 10 different stories that we knew were going to happen. And then we just sort of sent those to the authors and said, you know, which one do you want? And a lot of people's stories just kind of very neatly fit into that. And so we didn't really have to tell anybody, you know, you're going to do this piece. Over much. A lot of people were really happy with kind of finding something in there. I think Brandon, you claimed you claimed your spot pretty quickly with 81 in there. So that was sort of how that had happened. And in particular with the last story with Chelsea Vowles, we had asked her for something that was sort of the last 15-year chunk, but also that gestured to a future. Beyond Canada, that kind of beyond idea coming back in. In terms of the visual artists, those were kind of assigned based on author suggestions. So for example, Brandon was really keen to work with Tara, and we thought her style seemed suitable to what we were looking for. We sort of aimed for a realistic-ish style, as opposed to something more stylized. And then we kind of connected artists whose work worked well with a particular story. For example, with Rosie, GMV's artwork just goes really well with the type of story that Rachel and Sean were trying to tell. And they loved his style. It was very much their thing. So yeah, guidelines were mostly just kind of around like length. After that, you know, the splash pages at the beginning of each one. We asked all the writers to do the personal statement, and suggest things for the timelines. And I love that you noticed that the timelines are not linear, because we spent a lot of time thinking about that and how we could present that so that it wasn't super linear. Yeah, and I did want to mention that Alison Kuistra and Jamie Morin did the substantive edits and worked more directly with the authors on developing their stories. And I think they were really amazing at it, and we didn't put their names in the book, so they don't necessarily get the credit they're due as often as perhaps would be nice. So yeah.
Nice. Yeah, no, it flows so perfectly together that every time I think about all of the people involved, it's how did this happen? So congratulations. I think it's great.
Logistically, I don't think I knew what I was getting into.
It's better if you don't, really, with these projects. Just jump on in and, you know.
Ignorance is bliss.
So I have a question for both Brandon and Tara. Obviously, we know, is this the first time you've worked together? No. But what was the process like to illustrate the project? So I'm really interested, when you have a writer and an illustrator, how much do you work collaboratively together, and then how much are you reacting to each other's work? Can you speak a little bit about that?
Well, or
go ahead. Oh yeah, you can.
Well, I mean, this is I was actually doing the math today. That was our 5th collaboration.
Oh my gosh, no way.
Yeah.
Well, I was trying to think. I thought 3. Wow.
Yeah. So for me, when I had the when Laura asked who would I want to work with, and it didn't even hesitate, because I knew already, she makes it so much easier for me. Because I could just write something, I already have so much trust and faith in what she can do and what she has done, that I had no problem handing this off whatsoever. But it was also kind of funny too, because we'd be just sometimes she'd send me some stuff and we'd be texting back and forth or whatever. It's like, oh, what do you think of this? Oh, I don't know, what do you think of this? So it was very, I think, hopefully very fluid, and I hope I was really easy to work with.
Oh yeah. Too old now to work with the people that I don't like to work with. Obviously, I like working with you because we've done 5 projects together. I think I think that Brandon is a good writer. You're a good writer, so it leaves me a lot of ideas. I can envision what you've written because it's there. There's no question that you've written it. Okay, I'm going to draw this. I think for this particular project, I had to go to you a lot for visuals of how do things look, because for me, because it is a historical thing, and just because it's from here, I think it's cool when we have things that are from our own place. No one else will know what that house is, or that the bridge is like this or whatever, but the people that live there will know that is based on it, and they'll know, oh, that's the place, that's there, that's by so-and-so's house, or that is so-and-so's house. So Brandon actually went and took photographs for me a bunch of times, and like I said, he said we were texting a lot and just is this what it looks like? Is this what you were kind of thinking? And I did watch the incident at Restigouche a lot, and there is a lot of document, in terms of photographs that I was able to find and use, so that it's going to be more historically accurate. I'm not just drawing whatever, cop cars from today or something like that, for instance, that it's going to be this took place then, and people are wearing clothes from the 80s and things like that. So we did a lot of research, and he helped me with a lot of research for that sort of thing. And there was a couple characters that are actual people, and I wanted to make sure that they looked quasi like those people. They're just caricatures of those people, but that there was a resemblance there anyways.
Yeah.
So very fluid. I think it was very fluid.
Yeah. Your answer was way better than mine.
The magic of having a really good chemistry.
Yeah.
This is a question for the group of, have you been surprised by the reaction to the book? So just so the watchers of this know, it's received very strong reviews. It won 2 Manitoba Book Awards, the McNally Robinson Book of the Year and the Mary Scorer Award for Best First Book. Alicia Elliott wrote the foreword. Oh, she's so great. Just a word to all the settlers like myself out there. If you're going to follow one person on Twitter, let it be Alicia Elliott. She is great. Yeah, so were you surprised by this success? What's the experience been like for you?
Who wants to talk first?
I guess I can go first, and then everyone else can do way better answer than me. Was I surprised? No, only because when Laura pitched the project, and then when we got to word of who the other collaborator or who the other writers were going to be, like I felt like a speak. But I knew like I was in good company. And with everyone, all the talent that was involved, I knew that we were doing something special. So that didn't surprise me. The level of success has surprised me. Like I didn't think it was going to take off the way it has taken off. I think that's the one thing that surprised me. But in terms of, I already knew that we were doing something special. And somebody else.
I was super shocked because, when I agreed to do this project, I actually had a bunch of other projects that I was doing. And when I read the story, I was just like, oh my God, like sometimes there's just things or projects that you just are like, I have to work on that. And I just felt like this was a project, like I really want to work on this. So as I was working on it, like it just kind of was like a project that was in between two other projects, and I didn't really think too much about it in terms of like how will this impact anything or anyone. But now it's like, oh my gosh, this is gonna impact so many people. Like it's crazy, insane. Like how much it's being marketed, and I guess I haven't worked on a project. I worked in TV, but other than that, I haven't worked on any projects that have been marketed to this extent, I guess. And I think that's really awesome because I do a lot of things, and I see a lot of things that just don't kind of end up going anywhere. And I think this is really awesome that people are reading it, that it's like winning these awards, and just the fact that these stories are people are reading them. I couldn't ask for anything more than to spread these stories, spread our culture, and that more people know about these things in history. I think it's really amazing to be a part of that. That was very amazing.
Yeah,
and
it's go ahead. Go ahead.
That was it.
I was just going to say that I think I would agree with Brandon that I was a pretty new editor at that point, and so I knew I was working on something special, and I was working on something that I could really be passionate about. I think that it was really cool to work with so many really experienced creators and really patient creators throughout the process. But also we were creating something as a response, and we knew that the retelling of history would be groundbreaking, and that it really is unique. That's what we set out to create. There isn't really anything like this that is quite as in depth and still covers the same breadth of material. I think the part we didn't anticipate, though, was the, for lack of a better word, I don't like this word, but synergy that kind of developed between the different collaborators and their stories. We didn't plan for there to be a thread or a narrative through all of the stories, aside from just sort of the chronology. But I think when you read it, there is a thread, there is a narrative that is going on here that is extremely powerful. And it's really cool to see it come together that way, kind of not super intentionally. Yeah, it was just really, really amazing to work on it for me as well.
Yeah, and again, I think it's just that magical chemistry thing that you just can't really, between these two writers, but just between the project overall too, that you can't plan on, and sometimes it's just the magic will happen. I've a question for Tara and Brandon. As Indigenous artists working on this project, how important are projects like this in your perspective towards truth and reconciliation? Can you speak a little bit about that?
Well, you've kind of already said it in the beginning too, right? Like, and it's the same thing that I've heard for years is I never heard about this. How come I didn't know about this? These were the things that I've heard for for too long. And I think these stories, the project was so important because these stories needed to be told. Graphic novels are a great way of making it accessible, making these stories accessible to a wider audience, or even just, you know, a new audience. So, you know, something like this really helps. It really helps people for the accessibility, and it also, you know, it shines a light on the hidden past, and then hopefully that brings, you know, when someone reads this book for the first time, or if they keep on saying, you know, the next thing what I don't want to hear 5 years from now, or even, like, you know, 10 years or even 20 years from now, is I don't want to hear that same excuse or that same thing, you know, like, how come I never heard about this? Like, well, you know what? Because there wasn't anything, but now there is. And so now when you see someone protesting, or if you see an Indigenous person protesting or a group protesting, you'll know why they're protesting, as opposed to, you know, even as far back as even 10 years ago, or even before the TRC recommendations, you know, you had the National Day of Action. You know, I was in Ottawa for a lot of those events, a lot of those marches for I'll No More. And then you still have people like, you know, why are they doing that? And, you know, I don't get it, you know, and it's because of, you know, for lack of a better word, and I'm not trying to be mean, is ignorance, but it was ignorance by, and I guess kind of touching on a more topical issue, is just systematic racism, right? The institutions were purposely blocking these stories from being told, right? So there's a reason why a lot of people don't or didn't know, but now there's more reason for people to know, right? So that's kind of like where I see the value of projects and books like this.
Do you have anything to add, Karen?
For me, I just want to share a little anecdote, I guess. So when I was growing up, I was in the car, and the only, I guess, Indigenous people that I saw on TV were like cowboys and Indians. So I'm sitting in the back of the car with all my aunts, my mom, and my dad, and then I'm like, I just start saying like, you know what? I'm afraid. And they're like, you're afraid of what? And I'm like, I'm afraid of Indians. And they were like, they all burst out laughing. I remember feeling like this super fear, and they're like, you're in a car full of Indians. Like, what is wrong with you? So I was like, I was like, yeah, no. You're not the ones that are on TV. So anyways, the point of my story is that as a child, there were no representations in any of my entertainment that were Indigenous, or for me to like look up to, or this sort of thing. Doing these comics and doing these things, like I'm creating these for the kid that I was, that I didn't get to see these. So it's for the kids that are growing up now that are going to want to have Indigenous representation in their comics, in their animation, in their stories, all of these things. One of the things I love about Brennan's story is that, like, in the end, what you normally see is a lot of stories about Indigenous people where we're being beaten down and we are the victims, and you know, like the murdered Indigenous women, all these things were always the victims. But in this story, we were the heroes. And to me, it was just like, yeah, like they did it. They friggin' did it. And it's a real story. They did friggin' do it. They really did it. They said no. And they drove them off with what they had, with their tools and things like this. And they said, get out of here. We don't want you here. Leave. Because they had the power to do that. And people, I think now, they don't know what kind of power that they have. That they have to listen to the government and do what the government says and things like that. The government is to serve us. And if they want to take it out, and like the fact that they did it against like what I would consider military force, it was amazing to me. It was just an amazing story of like triumph. I was also the illustrator for the Chelsea Val story, and her story about the future was a future where Indigenous people have taken over, and in the story made the world a better place. Can you imagine that? Like, can you imagine that's what I would want to aspire to now? And that is where I want my stories to lead, that the future is where Indigenous people have been given the chance to use their knowledge to make the world a better place. It's a funny story. I don't want to like give it away or whatever, but the non-Indigenous people fear what the Indigenous people are going to do now that they're kind of in charge. So they leave, but they're like, why do you fear it? And they feared it because of what they did to Indigenous people. But the Indigenous people don't understand why they feared it. And that's just so interesting to me, because it's like, we weren't going to do anything to you. We were making everything better. And I think that's like something that we can aspire to, instead of maybe just feeling as though we're always victims in situations. I think it's just so important to have representation. When you see it, when you know about it, that's when you can become it, or think about it and becoming it.
Yeah. Do you have anything to add, Laura?
No, I think I'm good.
Yeah, amazing. I couldn't agree more. And I'm just so excited. I just wonder, you know, kind of in the next generation, so kids that are in school today and they're able, you know, to read David Alexander Robertson's book, When We Were Alone, as they're little, you know what I mean? And growing up in that world, I can't wait. You know, I wish I could stay this age forever, but I can't wait for the next 25 years and like what these kids and how much more of a voice and, you know, ownership over like taking up space. And I'm really interested in reclaiming language as well. Like, will we have an opportunity to learn Indigenous languages in school? And yeah, it's very exciting, I think. Is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you'd like to share? Anything that came to mind? Funny stories?
Well, buckle up. I've got no.
Oh, I had one question from the lovely Sam, brilliant mind tuning in. They have a question. As a publisher, how do you ensure a book like this gets disseminated to a variety of communities? Can you talk a little bit? The very interesting story of distribution. Yeah.
That is interesting. I guess the big thing that with this book that may have been different from a lot of other books was that we were able, because of the long process and also just because of how many pieces go into a graphic novel, we were able to start talking about this book really, really early. You know, you can start sharing storyboards, you can start sharing the cover, you can share artwork as it progresses. And so I think we were just in general able to create, you know, with 300 pages of artwork, you can share a lot and really get people excited, and that word of mouth then becomes your friend. So that people are looking for this book in a different way than might be true for another title. In terms of specifics, it's not really my department, to be perfectly honest. I was mostly supplying marketing with what they needed, and we have a distribution company, of course, and they take care of that end of things for the most part. But I think that was a really big piece of the success, was being able to get people excited about it from the beginning, especially those wonderful videos that the contributors did with interviews about it. They were shared very widely, and that word of mouth was really what got it so far.
Excellent. Yeah, to wrap up, I'll just send the call to action for everybody to go and get this book. And it should be available. I know you can get it here in Winnipeg at the library, but that's a call to action too, of like, if you're at your local library and there aren't these great books by Indigenous writers and creators, please ask for them. You know, something that everybody can do just to make these stories accessible to everybody. And available in communities all across the country. Well, I guess we'll wrap up our pilot episode. Thank you both for being so brave. Thank you, Laura, so much for coming on board and sharing the story behind the story. And thank you so much for this book, and just for being open to sharing your process and your creative genius. That was so great. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
And thank you to everybody for tuning in, and hopefully there will be an episode 2 coming up soon. Thank you so much.